Hello everyone, welcome to another Inkarnate live stream. Today we're going to be making watermill and counter maps with the Fantasy Battlemap style. I'm pretty excited about this. I'm going to go ahead and let people filter in here. Alright, so I don't really have a whole lot of announcements right now. We just posted the weekly map prompts for February as well as the stream calendar. So go check the notifications, it's that bell in your top right hand corner. Go ahead and click that and just see what's new. I'm not going to waste any time. We're just going to jump right in. You're going to want to clone and edit this map. You're going to go ahead and find the link to that. If you're following on Twitch, you'll find that in the chat. If you're following on YouTube, you'll find that link in the video description. Hey, first time chatter, Lobster, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. Awesome. So we're making watermills. So as you know, just go ahead and clone and edit this map to follow along. Now here at Inkarnate, we always like to learn a little bit about something before we decide to replicate it in the tool. It's just so much easier to replicate something when you know just a little bit about it. So let's just kind of go over this diagram that was made with the Fantasy regional style, HD style, and made with the path tool as well. So first is the environment. Whenever you're trying to figure out where to put a structure, you need to first figure out the environment. So let's take a look at the environment. You notice that there's going to be a river. Of course, there's a watermill, right? We want to utilize the flow of water. So being near a river is going to be key. You'll also notice that it's on a bend as well. That bend's important because it's go ahead and allows the channel that hits that watermill wheel. It's going to be a little bit straighter, and so there's going to be less construction. It's not going to stop the flow of water or hinder the flow of water. So being on a bend is a good choice. And you're also going to notice that it's next to a waterfall. And the waterfall is important for a specific reason because water speeds up before a waterfall because of gravity. Water falls off like this, and it causes the water to pick up speed. And the reason why you want some momentum in the flow of the water is just that when it comes in contact with the wheel on your mill, it has enough force to allow the wheel to turn. So that's very important. Let's also go over the components as well, not just the terrain. I see another first time chatter. Hey, Hockey Sloth, welcome. Glad that you're here. Awesome. Okay, let's go over this diagram a little bit. We went over the terrain. Let's talk about the structures themselves. You see there's going to be a mill right here. The mill utilizes water power to operate a mechanism such as a grindstone or looms or whatever other kind of mechanism that you want to use. There's that mill. And they're also going to have the millwright's house. If you don't know what a millwright is, the millwright is the person who either builds, designs mills, or also operates the mill. So we're going to have a house on the side for the millwright to live. And of course, their workspace is going to be that mill. Hey, another first-time chatter. Welcome. Glad that you are here, Samuel 50 Hitter Pro. Awesome. So glad that you're here. Okay. Now you're also going to notice that the channel in which is dug in that bend is referred to as the raceway. That raceway is important because that raceway is what you're using to control the flow, the direction of the water. So this channel is dug out right here. And then the wheel is going to be in that channel, and that's referred to as that wheel pit. And this is a specific kind of wheel. There are different types of water wheels. This one is referred to as undershot. And the reason why it's called undershot is because the water hits the bottom of the wheel and not the top. Sometimes waterfalls will be like this. The water will go down, causing the wheel to go in a different direction. But this is an undershot. So the undershot causes the wheel to go in that direction because the water is flowing and hit that, okay? Now, there are two components of the raceway. The first one is called the head race, and that's the water that comes before it hits the wheelhouse or the wheel pit. The water after it hits the wheelhouse or wheel pit is referred to as the tail race. That's going to be important. You're also going to notice another smaller channel right here, which is referred to as the spillway. The spillway is important because the spillway is what you use to cause the stop of the flow of the water to get to the wheelhouse, and the water will flow down the spillway and back into the river. And this has multiple purposes. Let's say that there's flooding, too much water. This will help divert some of that water so it doesn't damage the wheelhouse. But the spillway is more specifically used for channeling the water off, so you can turn the water off before it gets to the wheelhouse so that you can work on the wheel unhindered. Okay, let's go ahead and get rid of these. And that's pretty much it for the diagram. Now the hard part is trying to translate this onto a battle map. And I'm gonna show you how you go about doing that. The first thing I like to do is to take that diagram that I have right there and just scale it down and then put it somewhere else. So I'll have a mini version of the diagram to kind of help me out. You can put it in the corner somewhere. It's just to have a visual guide. It's really hard to build something just from your straight memory alone or what's in your head. So having a reference is really, really, really helpful when constructing a map, any kind of map, doesn't matter what it is. Let's go ahead and look at the layout. And the layout is pretty simple. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the mini diagram just for now, so you can kind of see it, or I'll just diminish it and make it a little bit smaller, or move it out of the way a little bit. Now you can see that I've created the river part right here, and I've done that with blue paths, so that way you know which part is river, and then the white is going to be like structures made by whatever species lives in your world. And you're going to see I have that waterfall. There's the waterfall right here. There's the bridge. You notice that I also have the raceway, or the raceway right here. I also have the mill, the Millwright's house. So it's all there. Everything is there. So when you're putting it together, you can just use the path tool, and the path tool has the segment section right here, and this segment part of the tool is really, really helpful for making structures. And I generally like to use a grid when I'm putting everything together. You'll notice that I'm following somewhat of the grid. With the grid on, you'll see that my walls are lined up with that grid. The grid is really, really helpful. It's going to help for one with scale, because each one of those squares is going to represent 5 square feet. And of course, it's going to be easier for you to line up your walls. When you're doing your wall Tetris, until the room tool comes about, you're going to be doing wall Tetris. You want to have some kind of guide to help you out when placing the wall, so that way they're not too crooked. A little crooked is okay, gives a little bit of flavor to the wall, but just so you line them up well enough, use that grid tool and the path tool to make your floor plans or your layout. That's going to be very, very helpful. I'm going to go ahead and turn the mini diagram. We don't need it anymore. So you have put that layout. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that grid as well. It just looks weird. Okay. From here, what you want to do is once you've finished your layout, you want to fill the entire map with the add mode of the mask tool. You can click a fill all or add with the square here and just drag all the way across and press enter or add selected shape, and you're going to fill up the entire thing with the add mode of the mask tool. After you've filled up the entire canvas of the map with the add mode of the mask tool, you'll use the subtract mode and a circle shape, and you'll just trace out the water parts. So that way there's going to be 2 paintable layers. The add mode is going to be the land, and the subtract mode is going to be the water. So this way, when it comes to painting your land and your water, they can be painted separately. It's really frustrating when you're painting the land and you accidentally go off into the water. You can avoid that by using different mask layers. Very helpful. Okay, from here, let's go ahead and put our land on, our foreground, and our water. I've already done the texturing already, but I'll be going over techniques as well. Let's go ahead and just review it real quick. You'll see that it fits onto the diagram, onto the layout. Everything's put together right. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off the layout. We no longer need it, maybe except for where the waterfall is there. Go ahead and turn that off. Once you've kind of put together, this is what it looks like, sort of. Obviously the texturing is going to be a bit different, but you can see that there's the water from the land, so I'm not accidentally painting off from each other. After you've kind of done putting the land together, putting the water together, and you've started putting the outline for the structures, the texturing, you're going to want to brick up the raceway and the spillway. It's the same thing when you are digging a well, right? When you're digging a well, you dig the hole and then you brick around the walls. It's the same thing here. You're going to brick that channel. So let's go to the raceway and spillway. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And it's pretty simple. You're just going to line the entire raceway with a wall of your choice. I just went ahead and used this kind of stone brick texture. And you'll see that it's lined all along the spillway and the raceway. That way there won't be any erosion. There's stone right here. So when the water flows into this channel, it's not going to erode because it's not land, it's stone. Okay. After the spillway, after putting the raceway and the spillway in, let's go ahead and throw in the bridge. And the bridge is important because this is all about access. You want to have access to get to the mill from the other side. So it's important to throw in that bridge. And the bridge was really, really easy to make. All I did was just use docks. And I used the longer dock pieces. And then I used these rail pieces from the train to kind of create the railing of the bridge. And what's really helpful is to make the railing lighter and to make the bridge or the dock stamps darker so that way there's some contrast. You know that the dock, the boardwalk, the footing part is below and the railing is higher up. So you're using contrast. Lighter railing, darker foot. Hello, first time chatter, Prozone 37. Welcome. Glad that you are here. Awesome. So that bridge is there. That bridge gives us access. Okay, let's go ahead and let's go put in our water as well, the stamps that you would put in the water. And for the waterfall stuff, the way making a waterfall is pretty easy. We have a stream on that. You can go ahead and check out our YouTube for that. And also when it comes to realistic water, we have another stream on how to make realistic water. I think the first one is called How to Create Realistic Water Part 1, and rivers will be in that. But the most important thing with the water is obviously the waterfall here. And the waterfall is easy, just waterfall stamps. And I've dropped the contrast down. So that way I've removed all the black line work within it. So it's just white. And then I just used snow, the alpha snow texture. And it doesn't matter which alpha snow texture you use. But I'm just using that to show a little bit of white water or rapid, just a little bit. And then I've used a wave of my choice to show the direction or flow of the water. So it's important to use waves or some kind of texturing technique that allows for you to show flow in the water. Okay, let's go ahead and go right into the floor plan, because what we have here is the mill. This space right here, we're going to be constructing the mill right there. So let's go ahead and talk about that first. Let's go to our mill first floor. I'll go ahead and turn this on. And you start with your walls. We'll go ahead and turn that grid on so you can see carefully that the grid does line up with the walls. Remember, it's helpful to have that. It also tells you the space, how many square feet a building is, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 feet wide. So it's kind of a long. So this is going to help us to understand the scale and the size like we talked about earlier, okay? So constructing the walls is simple. Just place them around, make the shape that you want. Most shapes are pretty easy to make. Stick with a rectangle first. Now I'm using a specific guide myself. I'm using this mini diagram right here, but you'll see the overall architecture here. Let me go ahead and just scale in. You'll see that there's a pop out right here. This section right here is the pop out. And in the main structure, this piece right here is going to be this part right here. So just understanding the basic shapes, it's just a basic rectangle with a small rectangular pop out with a pitched or A-frame roof. Okay, not too difficult. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Let's go ahead and turn off our mini diagram. We're not going to need it anymore. Let's go ahead and talk about our floor plans first, because we got to know what exactly is going to be going on inside of the mill. I always like to make just a little mini floor plan just with the path tool. Remember, you can use that segments. It's really easy. You don't need a pen to use the segment section, the segment feature of the path tool. So it's kind of easy to put together. You just click, drag, click, drag, click, drag, and create the shape with the path tool. Let's go over real quickly the floor plan. Now, really, there's only one floor, really, the ground floor. It's actually a little bit higher up. The base of this is going to be stone, so the floor will be a little bit higher up, because if it's flooded, you have the stone base. So that way it doesn't flood or get into the equipment or destroy it. So it's going to be raised up above about 2, 3, maybe 4 feet higher up than the ground level. And it's made of stone. You'll notice that the interior texture is made with stone. And there are some key components that you're going to need in the mill. The most important one, obviously, is going to be the water wheel itself. And of course, the mechanism that operates, that's going to be using that. And that's going to be this millstone right here. The millstone is what's going to be used to grind the grain. We're going to talk about, you're going to see there's going to be access. Whenever I type in access, that just means there's going to be a door there. And access is super important because you're going to need access to get to the wheel, to operate it, to go and fix it, do any repairs. You need access to go across this bridge, across the channel, to get to the gangway, and we'll talk about what that is. See, there's access here, another access that leads to a loading dock. We'll talk more about that in a moment, and another access point that kind of leads to the millwright's house. So it's always important to know where your stairs are. You know, so there's some stairs right here, where stairs are going to be, where doors are going to be. So that way it's easier to construct them and then put them together. And then don't forget to use that grid to make sure that they're the right size. So you've got the bridge. Let's just talk about flow of traffic. So how you walk when you get into it, you go across the bridge that goes across the tail race, a stairwell that goes up onto what's called a gangway. A gangway is like a raised platform. And the reason why we have a gangway here is so that the millwright can be up high on top of the gangway and can oversee the millstone mechanism to make sure that everything is working properly, that nothing is breaking, or if the millwright wants to observe some of the people that might be working there as well. So it's what's called a gangway, and it's nice and high up so that you have access. You can kind of see where everything is, and you can see that there's staircases from the gangway that lead down onto the main part of the floor where that millstone is. And there's also going to be, when you go from the millstone floor, you can go up the gangway and then out to the loading dock. A loading dock is basically where you load up the bags of grain or whatever it might be, whatever product you're producing there, and then loading it onto a cart. So that's going to be important to have a loading dock. So everything has a bit of a function. It's really helpful to implement function when you're making your maps. It doesn't have to be 100%. It's just that you need to have some parts that are realistic. The gangway makes sense. It works as an overview, as a kind of a point in which you can see all the mechanism properly. It's also where the loading dock is, access to the loading dock, where the millstone is. And we're going to talk about the mechanism because that's going to be really, really important. What's iconic for a water mill is going to be the water wheel. So we'll go into that when we get into the stamp portion. When it comes to the millwright's house, we're going with very basic, just a simple door that goes into this house. It's not going to be massive. It's just going to be one floor. Now there is going to be another floor in the mill, but it's mostly going to be loft. So let me go back into the floor plan real quick. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that first floor. And I'm going to show you what the loft is going to be. The loft is basically going to be up in the rafter space because this is basically a vaulted ceiling building. There's no need for an additional floor. It's just going to be rafters at the top, and there's going to be loft, and that's where you're going to be storing things. The access to the loft will be right here because it's right along the gangway. That's going to be located right here, and you'll be able to store stuff up here in this loft, bags of grain, equipment, whatever it is you want to have. And of course, this part right here that you see right here, this part, actually it won't be that part, it'll be this part right here. Just this part right here will be the ground floor. So you'll be able to see down into the floor below you. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and delete this. All right, we don't need the diagram anymore or the floor plan. You have a general idea of what we're going to be putting down. Let's go ahead and get started first with access. So once you've kind of put down your walls, you're going to want to start putting your access points down. So the first thing, access points are going to be doors. So let's go ahead and take a look at our doors. You've got a door that leads into the stairwell, a door that leads into the main mill area onto the gangway. There's access to the water mill, and then there's access to the millwright's house. Okay, So always remember, so after you've put down your walls, go ahead and put down your access points. It's going to be any kind of stairwells, stairs, doors. Always important to put down your access first. Now, after you've done access, we can go ahead and start opening up some other things. Let's go ahead and put in our gangway. So let me go ahead and open up the interior, and we'll go ahead and open up the gangway. Now look carefully. I'll just use docks as the gangway and wooden stairs to go down onto the main floor. Okay. And these right here, these are referred to as, these are fences, a rope fence with lumber posts. Those work great as kind of a rope railing to make sure that the millwright, workers, overseer, anything like that doesn't fall off the gangway, because the gangway is probably going to be about 5 or 6 feet up. So that's going to protect anyone from falling over the gangway. And then of course, there's also, we're going to put, there's a little pop out right here of a dock, and we're going to put a crane right there to lift multiple sacks, because these sacks are going to be kind of big and they're going to be heavy. And so unless you have a lot of laborers to help you with it, you're going to need some kind of mechanism. We can just use a very simple crane. Now, the most iconic thing, of course, is going to be the milling mechanism. If you don't have some kind of milling mechanism, it's going to seem really, really odd, right? So the way that you put the mechanism together is really simple. There's an entire stamp that's just the grindstone or the millstone. And all those gears that you see right there are all one stamp. So you don't have to do anything complicated and learn where to position all of the gears and things like that. You don't have to do that. It's just all one stamp. Just make sure that you line it up with the Watermills axle, so that way, because you'll notice right here that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this grid off. Kind of sad here. You'll notice here that here's the axle. I'll just use the piece of wood. Make sure that it's lined up and centered with that gear that's on this whole stamp right here, okay? Now this is gonna be the grindstone. This thing's gonna rotate and it's gonna grind grain, okay? And of course, what you're going to find a lot of probably is you're going to find some sacks with grain. So we'll put sacks everywhere. We're also going to put in a tool bench, because it's important to have some realistic elements, such as a workbench right here. Oopsie, I think it's supposed to be over here. My mistake. Put it right there. There's supposed to be a workbench right here. The workbench is just going to have the tools. They're going to be quickly accessible so that you can go and work on any of the equipment that needs to be fixed. So if there's something wrong with the water wheel, something wrong with the grindstone, they can go ahead and just activate the spillway, and then that way the water wheel will stop, and then they can go ahead and start working on the equipment. Other things we're going to have is we're going to have the ladder that gives us access. The ladder is going to give us access to the loft. There's going to be that crane we talked about right here. That crane, the way that it works is you're going to look at the swivel like this, the rotation, and it's going to carry these bags right here and then lift them up onto this opening onto the gangway. All right. Let's also throw in our windows. Now, whenever you're operating your windows, it's always good to figure out where the windows are going to be, okay? Now, you don't have to follow the guide that I put down, I made with the regional stamps. Really, you just want to put the windows where it makes sense. So, for starters, we want the natural lighting to come in and kind of lighten up this space. We want this natural lighting to come in and light up the mill floor, so that way you have tons of visibility, tons of light. So during the day, make sure that there's windows there so that fills in into there, or if there's some kind of electric lighting, whatever kind of lighting or electricity you're using in your world, it's up to you. If it's medieval fantasy, it could be candle work or whatever, magic, whatever, it's up to you. You just figure out what the source is. And there's obviously another one right here, this light right here, that's going to lighten up this space. Okay, let's build in that hallway entrance. So now you have that stairwell that goes up and leads up into the gangway. And let's open up those. Let's go ahead and put in the loading dock. Remember we talked about the loading dock? When you're walking back and forth along the gangway and you're kind of collecting all of the bags that end up on the gangway, you go down these steps onto the loading dock. The loading dock is propped up, And you'll notice that there is a cart here with some sacks. And so it's just to let you know that this is a loading dock. How do you know what that piece is if you don't put some details there that make it clear what exactly that area is for? Okay, I think everything is in. Let's throw in last but not least, we can throw in our light sources. And just put light sources by the windows just to show that there's light going in. You can throw down additional light sources as you need. Just put them down. Put them right where they're going to come in contact. If you wanted to put like a light source on the ground somewhere, just make sure that you draw a little line right here and kind of show wherever it comes in contact with the ground. Then you can go and put a light source right on top right there. Okay. Let's also do our first floor for our Millwright's house real quick. I'll go ahead and open that up. So you just see the walls. See, I've got some walls here. We'll go and put on that first floor. And we'll come back to the Millwright's house in just a moment. Let's go ahead and turn on some filters here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on an HSBC filter. And I'm going to use this to kind of hide or to try to diminish the ground floor a little bit when I put up my mill loft. Okay. Now you're going to see that this is where the rafters are. That's why you can kind of see these wooden planks right here. These are going to be the rafters, or what's called an A-frame. These are the things that are holding up the roof. And I'm just putting the rafters in there so you can kind of tell that, hey, this is indeed where the roof is. And you'll notice that there's an opening. Of course, it's just right here. The rest is open, so you can see the machinery and everything down there. And it's a nice thing to have a loft. Everyone knows I like multiple floored buildings because it's always nice to have combat that's unique. And I just am obsessed with just kicking my enemies off of tall areas. So you can kick them off the loft. Maybe they splat and land on the millstone and they get grinded by the millstone, or you throw them off, whatever. So having that second floor or that loft space is really nice. And the thing that you do to show what that function of that room is by just throwing in some very simple details, like you can throw in your sacks like this, and you can throw in your windows. Remember, the windows are to create natural lighting, so we'll bring some light in so it's not too dark up there in the rafters. And you can also, maybe you're in combat, you can pick up one of these sacks and just lob them at someone on the ground. It hits them in the head, knocks them out. So it's kind of fun to kind of create an environment, an encounter. That's a lot of fun. Be creative. Let your players just kind of explore and have some fun. All right. So that's going to be that rafter space. Let's go ahead and turn off the rafter space. We'll go ahead and turn the mill loft off for now, and we'll turn off that filter. We don't need it for now. Let's go back to the Millwright's house. And then what's at the Millwright's house is pretty simple and pretty basic stuff. We're not going to add a whole lot inside the Millwright's house, just the basic stuff. First, of course, access. You need to have access for them to get into the building. Next thing you want to have is, if you have any fireplaces, throw them down as well, because it's going to be attached to the wall, right? So throw in your fireplace and your chimney. Let's go ahead and open up the interior and turn that on. And you're going to notice just some basic stuff. A sitting area for eating, a sleeping area for sleeping, a place to keep warm and for cooking your food, and a desk that the millwright can sit at, whether they're drawing up plans, going over quotas, or whatever they might be doing at that desk. So it's kind of a work desk space for them, since you don't want to work in the mill itself, because this machinery is going to be really loud. It's going to be really loud. So I'm not attaching the house to the mill itself. I'm making it as a separate building so that way the millwright can get some sleep at night. Otherwise, they're going to go crazy, right? All right. And the last thing we're going to throw down is going to be some vegetation. And the vegetation is not hard. It's not complex. Just make sure you throw down some trees. Make sure that there's always what's called overlapping. You want to make sure that there's like a stamp overlapping both the land and the water. And you want to make your trees a little bit brighter, because the higher up, the taller something is, the more it is exposed to light, because there's nothing hindering or stopping the light from hitting it. So if you want to show something as tall, you want that tree to show up as very tall, then of course you're going to make that a bit brighter. You're also going to notice that I've thrown down some ferns right here. Whenever you're putting down smaller vegetation that's going to be not nearly as tall, very small, going to be below the trees, make sure it's a layer below the trees and make it a little bit darker so that it contrasts against the lighter, taller part of the trees. And of course, cluster your vegetation. See how I have a cluster of 3? I always follow this kind of rule of 3 thing where I put a cluster of whatever I want, flowers, grass, tufts, swamp fronds, whatever it is. I like to put them in kind of little clusters of 3. And what also works really well is to use bushes to line any kind of walkways or roads. Notice that I have a road right here that leads from the millwright's house to the mill. You notice that I've got some shrub or some ferns right here that are lining the path as well. It's a great way to frame the path and to make it look nicer as well. And I don't recommend that you make a perfect line. I recommend that you maybe do 2 and then put 1 farther away from it, and then 3 more together, and then 1 apart like this. Don't make a perfect straight line with it because it's going to look unnatural or look a little weird. The only time you maybe want to do that is if it's maybe you're in a garden or some place where the plants are planted very intentionally. Okay. Let's also do some of our roofs real quick. I always like doing roofs because I find them to be really fascinating. So let me go ahead and turn the mill loft back on because that's roof part is right here. And then we'll go ahead and turn on the roofs here. Now in the past I've talked about roofs, but just do a quick review. Whenever you're putting your roof pieces together, just make sure that one half of the roofs are darker than the other. Notice how this side is darker than this side. It's just to give you contrast, to know that there's shadow, and so it doesn't look like it's just flat. So by making one side darker and the other side lighter, it's easier to tell the difference between one side and the other. So just know that when you're putting together your roof pieces. Notice also that if you have a pop out, like I've got a roof right here that covers the landing dock right here. It's just so that the goods don't get spoiled in the rain. Let's say that you're loading, it's a rainy day. You don't want the goods to get spoiled or get wet. And so putting over a little pop out roof to cover the landing is a great idea. Just make sure that you notice that this is below, that this roof right here is below the main part of the roof. So just make sure you make it just a little bit darker so that it looks like it's further down, okay? And then the last part about roofing that I want to mention is that whenever you're putting in what's called a dormer, that's this thing right here, just use object shadow. Notice that there's a shadow right here. Use the object shadow and the XY offsets to change the shadow so that way it looks like the dormer pops out. Because if you don't have this shadow right here, what's going to happen is it's just going to look like that dormer just melds into the roof and it doesn't look right. So make sure that you do put that shadow, whether you want to use the path tool like this, or if you want to use object shadow, whichever is easiest for you. Everyone's got their personal choices. Okay, let's go ahead and do one last piece here. We're going to go talk about texturing and maybe a little bit of filters. And one thing that I did was I found this awesome texture right here. This texture right here, I'm not sure what it's called. Let me see if I can remember. This one right here, it's called Rocks. This works great to show kind of rocky terrain. And so I've put that down, and it's a mix of actually 3 different textures. It's going to be a grass texture, a brown texture, well, 4 actually, if you include that stone, and then a cracked texture. This kind of just adds more texturing and more detail to your ground. And so that way it just doesn't all look super flat. So those little that cracked ground helps to remove that cracked alpha, helps to remove some of the flatness of the map. The other thing I want to mention is that you'll notice these sections right here look a little bit darker. I made them a little bit darker to represent a bank. You just use contrast to do that. You'd use that same brown dirt texture, and then I went into the advanced options. I used the advanced options from texture right here, and I just dropped the brightness down, and then with a lower opacity, I just went ahead and did strokes over the ledge where I wanted it to look like there was some kind of ledge there, or some kind of incline or decline going down. Okay, so that's how I kind of made that. So just make sure that you do that. And then of course, I also used a stone texture to show roads, to show the road. You'll notice that it's here. I've used it to make the roads right here and all along the access to the wheel, and here and here as well. And of course from the loading dock, so that way the materials can be loaded up in the loading dock and take you out to the village. And this mill is pretty big, so this could feed about a small town. I wouldn't say it's big enough to fit a village. If you wanted to have like a city, then you would have multiple mills, multiple ways of producing food, or whatever it is the mechanism might be in the mill. Let's go ahead and touch base on one last thing. Let's just throw in filters. It's always nice to throw in filters. So there are two filters that we're going to be using for this one. One, I'm going to be using this cold warm filter just to kind of cause things to blend a little bit more. The colors kind of come together. And I'm going to go ahead and just drop it down a little bit. And what warm cool does, or cool warm does, is it draws out your warm and your cools on your map, and it kind of makes them pop out, and it also blends it a little bit together too. And then I've also have a clarity filter. Let me go ahead and turn off that cold warm so you can see what it looks like. You see it kind of has this warmish feel to it, but then when you throw down this, it adds in a little bit of purple hint, which I really, or kind of tint, and I really like that. And then there's also this clarity filter, and the clarity is going to cause the colors to pop out. It's going to sharpen a little bit. So if I click clarity, you notice that it brightens up and causes things to pop out a little bit. All right, so that's basically the basics. Remember, just before you decide to make any kind of map, just figure out, learn a little bit about it, whether you're making mangroves, you're making a mill, you're making a farm. Whenever you're trying to make something, it's always nice to do a little bit of research first, so that way you know what kind of things to have on the map, whether you're going to have fencing, whether you're going to have an outhouse, whatever it is you want to build. It's nice to know a little bit first, to research a little bit. You don't have to know a whole lot. You don't have to spend, hours and hours researching about the topic. Just watch a 15-minute video that introduces you to a little bit about the concepts of what you're trying to replicate, and that way you have a general idea. And that way it's just so much easier. Then you want to kind of make a scene or some kind of diagram that's going to help you out, or a reference image. It doesn't matter whether you're going to use like a Pinterest, a Google image, or whatever you want to use. You want to make the image yourself so that you have a reference. Make sure that you use that, because it's going to be very, very helpful. It's so much easier than trying to figure it all out and in your head. Trust me, that is very frustrating. All right, well, that is it. Next week, I believe we're going to be creating farms. Next Wednesday, 3 p.m., we're going to be making farms. I'm excited about that. A farm is a staple. There's a lot of farm encounters. So we're going to make one. We're going to make it fun. And all the components that you see in a farm, I'm really excited for it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Now, if you like this map, you can go ahead and clone and edit it for yourself. If you like it, it's perfectly usable, just not for commercial purposes, for your own personal use, whatever your campaign might be. Go ahead and do that. All right? Awesome. First time chatter. So glad that you are here, by the way, Daily Innes. So glad that you are here. Awesome. Watermills was awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you so much. Don't forget to join our Discord, okay? And you can find me there and all of our mentors. And feel free to reach out to us, because that's what our community is all about, is helping you out. So, hey, thank you so much, everyone. Please stay safe and healthy, and merry map making. Thanks, First Chatter. Take care, everyone. I'll see you all soon.